A late-night call, unusual security detail, and a closed-door meeting that no one saw coming. Just moments ago, palace insiders confirmed a seismic shift in royal control. Duchess Sophie has intervened in a secretive move to stop Queen Camilla from influencing King Charles's health decisions. The monarchy's balance has tipped, and the repercussions are already being felt. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. What began as whispers around the king's health has now erupted into a full-blown confrontation inside Britain's most protected institution. King Charles's recent medical condition, once handled quietly and with traditional discretion, has become the flashpoint for a high-stakes internal struggle, revealing hidden allegiances and long-buried mistrust. For weeks, Camilla had been building influence behind palace walls, reportedly pushing for one of her own trusted advisors to be embedded into the king's medical team. The move, subtle on the surface, would have placed her in an unprecedented position of control not just as queen consort, but as the shadow voice behind life-altering decisions. But in a stunning and unexpected act of defiance, Duchess Sophie stepped in. According to multiple insiders, she invoked strict royal protocols surrounding medical governance and demanded absolute transparency over any changes to the king's care structure. Her demand, delivered in front of senior aides, froze the room. Camilla, sources say, was left blindsided, not by the boldness of the act, but by the fact that it had been pre-approved. Palace whispers now suggest that it wasn't just Sophie acting on instinct. She was allegedly following a private request from King Charles himself, made weeks earlier, asking her to oversee sensitive aspects of his health management due to her clarity, compassion, and lack of agenda. The fallout has been immediate. Royal staff are split, some stunned at Sophie's audacity, others quietly relieved that someone finally pulled the brake. This wasn't a soft intervention. This was a power recalibration. And in the ever-fragile monarchy, where every look, every meeting, every move signals deeper intent, this clash between Sophie and Camilla has shattered the illusion of unity that Buckingham Palace has so desperately tried to preserve. But to understand the full weight of Sophie's intervention, we must peel back the layers of trust, tension, and hidden rivalries that have long simmered beneath the surface. Once underestimated, now undeniable, Duchess Sophie's transformation from quiet support to trusted inner-circle force is no accident. Her path has been shaped by loyalty, resilience, and a keen understanding of how to survive royal storms. But it's what Charles whispered to her months ago that redefined everything. For years, Sophie moved with quiet precision, her every step measured, her words carefully chosen. While others battled for headlines and power plays, she focused on service, steadily earning the confidence of the late Queen Elizabeth, who reportedly praised her as the calm within the storm. That serenity became Sophie's signature, but it also concealed a sharp strategic mind that was taking note of every shift in the royal landscape. Behind closed doors, her counsel grew more valued, particularly by King Charles, who had begun to lean on her not only for her discretion, but her integrity. When whispers of Charles's first health scare began circulating months ago, it wasn't Camilla he turned to, it was Sophie. Sources now confirm that a series of private conversations between the king and the Duchess laid the groundwork for what would later become an informal, yet deeply personal agreement. If anything were to compromise his judgment, she would act not out of ambition, but duty. The significance of that trust cannot be overstated. This was not merely a bond of convenience, it was a deliberate handover of quiet authority. Within palace walls, that shift raised eyebrows. Camilla's allies viewed Sophie as harmless, a relic of the Windsor model of quiet compliance. But that view has shattered in recent days. Sophie, it turns out, was never playing the old game, she was preparing for the new one, and it was never about stealing the spotlight. It was about protecting the crown from being pulled into emotional entanglements that could cloud the most important decisions of Charles's reign. The idea that she was appointed, not invited, as one senior aide put it, changes everything. This wasn't a courtesy extended by Charles. It was a declaration of trust, forged behind closed doors in a meeting that took place weeks before the current storm erupted. One insider described the exchange as solemn, almost confessional. He said, "You're the only one who sees it all and says nothing." That moment, barely whispered, may have redefined the balance of power in the monarchy forever. And while Sophie was building trust behind the scenes, Camilla was building something else, an invisible influence network that is now under fire. They're not listed on official documents, but Camilla's circle of private confidantes has quietly expanded its grip from event planning to matters of royal health. Now, with the king's condition in question, their access is triggering alarm across royal corridors, and Sophie is not having it. It began subtly whispers of unfamiliar faces attending high-level meetings, nodding along during medical briefings, and walking unchallenged through corridors where only trusted officials used to tread. These were not palace aides or royal doctors. They were Camilla's circle longtime friends, personal consultants, and hand-picked confidantes, now wielding influence far beyond their station. At first, their presence raised eyebrows, not alarms. After all, Camilla had always surrounded herself with loyalists. But that changed the moment the king's health became a central concern. According to palace insiders, one advisor closely tied to Camilla recently floated a suggestion that would alter Charles's treatment regimen, bypassing not just protocol, but the very framework of the monarchy's decision-making. More disturbing still were reports that medical updates were no longer reaching the king's official private secretary first, but being funneled through Camilla's personal channels. That crossed a line. Senior courtiers, bound by centuries-old expectations of neutrality and hierarchy, began sounding alarms. The royal institution may be rooted in tradition, but it is governed by balance. And when one consort's circle appears to wield disproportionate control, that balance crumbles. Camilla's defenders insist her involvement is protective, driven by love, concern, and an intimate understanding of her husband's needs. But others see something far more calculated, a quiet power grab masked as devotion. And standing in direct opposition is Duchess Sophie, who, according to one high-level source, had been monitoring the situation for weeks through her own quiet network of confidants. Sophie, ever discreet, had remained in the background until now. It was she who intercepted a message meant for Camilla's advisor, revealing discussions that had never gone through official channels. That discovery was the tipping point. The tension between compassion and control could no longer be ignored. And as the staff scrambled to process what this meant for royal governance, one question echoed louder than the rest. Who, truly, is speaking for the king? Sophie's refusal to stay silent marked a decisive shift. What had once been a behind-the-scenes concern was now a visible fracture in the palace's command structure. But as the lines between compassion and control blur, one move from Sophie turned a silent protest into an unmistakable declaration of authority. Eyewitnesses describe the moment as icy but firm. In front of senior palace officials, Sophie intervened directly, halting a scheduled medical consultation Camilla had quietly arranged. What followed stunned even the most seasoned insiders. The tension in the room was palpable. Royal aides say everything had been set the king's schedule, his care team, and most controversially, a private consultant brought in under Camilla's advisement. But what wasn't anticipated was Sophie's entrance. With a quiet authority sharpened over years of earned trust, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Invoking royal health protocol, Sophie made it clear that no consultation could proceed without formal clearance, and that clearance, she revealed, had already been withdrawn. A hush fell over the room. Then came the turning point. A palace physician, caught in the crossfire, confirmed the bombshell. King Charles had indeed approved Sophie's access weeks ago. It wasn't an intrusion. It was a directive. Moments later, Camilla arrived expecting, by all accounts, to chair the meeting. Instead, she walked into a standoff. The Queen Consort, visibly rattled, was informed the consultation would not take place as planned. One of her aides reportedly challenged Sophie, suggesting she had overstepped. That aide didn't get far. What followed was a sharp, controlled exchange that left no room for misunderstanding. Sophie, flanked by official authorization and moral clarity, stood her ground. The king, present throughout, said nothing. But perhaps the most chilling detail is that he didn't intervene. Not to stop Camilla, not to stop Sophie. He simply listened. And that silence has echoed ever since. Hours later, Buckingham Palace issued a statement. Measured, diplomatic, purposefully vague. It spoke of internal alignment, of respect for private matters, and of protocol reaffirmed. But behind those polished words, insiders say, was a battle for access, a test of loyalty, and, some argue, a public unraveling of power dynamics once thought unshakable. Camilla, long accustomed to managing the king's time and space, had been blindsided. And Sophie, once dismissed as merely dutiful, had emerged as a gatekeeper to the crown. It wasn't just a medical decision, it was a moment of reckoning, and behind those vague words lies a deeper question. What does the king really want, and why has he allowed the storm to reach this boiling point? He hasn't spoken. No statement. No clarification. But behind closed doors, King Charles's silence speaks volumes. Is he orchestrating the chaos, or has he quietly handed the reins to someone he trusts more than his own wife? The palace has long operated in whispers, but none more deafening than the one surrounding King Charles himself. As the headlines spiral and tensions swell around the Queen Consort and Duchess Sophie, the monarch has chosen restraint. Not a word uttered publicly, not a single correction issued, but those closest to him say that silence is not submission, it is strategy. A familiar pattern to those who've studied the king's past. Stay quiet while storms rage, and when the dust clears, emerge untouched. But this time, there's more than silence at play. According to a trusted palace aide, Charles recently confided in an old friend, stating that he needs peace, not politics. And peace, it seems, now wears the face of Sophie, not Camilla. Over the last few weeks, observers have noted Sophie's growing proximity not in photo ops or staged appearances, but in closed-door briefings, private dinners, and confidential updates. Twice now, Camilla has been reportedly excluded from health-related meetings involving the king. Twice, the Queen Consort has had to learn of medical decisions secondhand. And twice, insiders say, she was livid. Yet the king remains unmoved. This isn't Charles retreating, it's Charles recalibrating, choosing not to confront conflict head-on, but to reposition the players around him. He's done it before letting advisors fall in scandals, only to re-emerge with deniability. But never has that game been played so close to the throne. Never has it involved his own wife being quietly sidelined. Or something even more delicate, a way for Charles to secure control without fracturing the monarchy in plain sight. One well-placed courtier put it bluntly, he hasn't abdicated power, he's simply outsourced it. And who better, in the king's eyes, than Sophie? A woman with no agenda, no tabloid trail, no craving for spotlight, just quiet strength and loyalty proven time and again. The question now isn't whether Charles is allowing this shift, it's how long he intends to keep it unspoken. And as that silence deepens, the royal walls echo with speculation. But if Charles is placing silent trust in Sophie, others within the royal circle are not staying quiet, and one name has emerged as a surprising new player. Known for her silence and service, Princess Anne rarely intervenes in drama. But this time, she has. Sources say Anne has taken a side, and it's not the one many expected. Her quiet alliance with Sophie may just tip the scales in this silent war. For decades, Princess Anne has been the monarchy's unshakable pillar, the one royal who has never courted controversy, never bowed to media games, and never entertained the theatrics that often swirl around her siblings. She is the stoic spine of the firm, known for duty over drama, work over whispers. But now, amid the rising tension between Queen Camilla and Duchess Sophie, Anne's silence has shattered in the most deliberate and telling way. Once considered a quiet supporter of Camilla, if not personally, then institutionally, Anne has made a subtle but unmistakable shift. Palace insiders confirm a private lunch took place between Anne and Sophie just days before Sophie halted Camilla's attempt to influence Charles's health decisions. And according to one senior source, Anne did more than listen, she advised. Her words, reportedly directed at Charles himself, were chilling in their precision. "Remove noise from your care." A phrase that, while brief, spoke volumes. It didn't name Camilla. It didn't need to. Those close to the king say he respects Anne's counsel more than nearly anyone else alive. So when she speaks, especially in such pointed tones, it ripples through the corridors of power. In the days that followed, staff began noticing Anne's increased presence around Charles's private quarters, unusual for someone who values independence and avoids idle lingerings. Her presence wasn't ceremonial. It was strategic, protective. But most shocking of all was Camilla's reaction. Sources say the Queen Consort, upon learning of Anne's neutrality, broke down in what one aide described as a moment of raw betrayal. For Camilla, Anne had been one of the few senior royals she counted on to remain neutral, if not quietly supportive. But now, that fragile alliance has cracked, and in the silence of Anne's pivot lies a message no one can ignore. The throne's core is shifting. And as this inner circle tightens around Charles, Camilla's isolation grows more pronounced. One courtier described the shift in dynamics as a realignment of loyalty not to titles, but to integrity. The war may be quiet, but its consequences are thunderous. And just as the dust began to settle, a private document surfaced, revealing the king's personal directive that changes everything. In a sealed file marked Confidential Directive, Charles's personal instructions regarding his care came to light. Dated weeks before the Camilla-Sophie standoff, it leaves no room for doubt. He made his choice, and it wasn't Camilla. It was the kind of document few ever see, and even fewer dare to leak. A sealed directive, signed by King Charles himself, outlining in chilling clarity who he trusts when it comes to his own well-being. And it wasn't his wife. The royal seal wasn't the most powerful mark on the page, it was the single name inked beneath the title, Duchess Sophie. According to those who've read it, the language was not only decisive, it was deeply personal. Sophie was named as the king's primary health liaison, a position that grants her not only access to every update and treatment plan, but also the authority to halt or question any interference beyond sovereign consent. That line alone sent shockwaves through senior staff. In it, Charles openly acknowledges the internal pressures he faces, referencing the palace's current instability and the urgency for what he calls silent stability. But it was another phrase that stopped every insider, cold 6 words, underlined and written with unmistakable finality. Trust is earned where noise is absent. It was not just a decision, it was a message. This wasn't Charles passively allowing events to unfold. This was Charles setting the board before anyone else knew they were playing. Camilla, sources confirm, was not made aware of this directive until after Sophie had already enforced her authority in the consultation room. By then, it was too late. The king had spoken, and though his voice remains absent in public, his intentions now ring louder than ever. The balance of influence has shifted. Not with press releases or orchestrated appearances, but with the ink of a man who has grown weary of noise and games. For Camilla, the exclusion cuts deeper than protocol. For Sophie, the appointment places her in a position no one predicted, but one Charles apparently prepared her for all along. And for the monarchy, it's a rare glimpse into how power moves when no one is watching. But the most emotional blow didn't come from the directive, it came from what Sophie did next, in a gesture that silenced even her critics. No cameras, no staff, just Sophie, a handwritten note, and a private visit to King Charles that lasted less than 20 minutes, but shifted the mood of the entire royal household. What she said remains private. What she did spoke volumes. It was the quiet after the storm that revealed the most. No official statement, no carefully managed photo op, just one car, one woman, and one purpose. Duchess Sophie, unaccompanied and without notice, entered the private wing of the royal residence at a time when tensions were still scorching the corridors. What unfolded behind closed doors was not recorded nor meant to be, but what emerged in its aftermath tells a story of profound emotional weight. Charles, still recovering and surrounded by the shadow of palace discord, reportedly received her with a stillness that had been absent for days. Those who passed by noticed a softness in the atmosphere, as if something had lifted. She stayed less than 20 minutes. When she left, her face was unreadable, but aides who entered after found a folded, handwritten note on Charles's nightstand. Its contents remain undisclosed. But one witness said that, for the first time in a week, the king smiled. Not a political smile, not one for show, a real one. Hours later, an aide quietly confirmed Charles had used the words, "She is the truest reflection of Elizabeth's legacy." The sentence was not casual. For a monarch still in the shadow of his mother's indelible reign, such praise carries weight, especially when spoken amid rising chaos, especially when the person he said it about had just prevented a constitutional fracture from spiraling into personal disaster. And while Charles retreated from his scheduled engagements over the following days, that visit became the moment people began to speak of Sophie in new terms, not as a quiet consort, not as a background player, but as a woman reshaping the monarchy with grace and now undeniable influence. Camilla's reaction, palace sources suggest, was restrained but telling. Devastated but composed is how one staffer described her demeanor. She had lost more than control. She had lost narrative, a narrative now carried in hushed tones through Windsor's halls, whispered between senior aides, and analysed by the public like never before. Because no royal briefing or press statement could undo what had happened in that private room, and while the palace raced to frame it as a moment of reconciliation, those closest knew better. The gesture, the note, and the king's response had quietly reset the chessboard. And as the palace scrambles to contain the emotional and political fallout, the country begins to ask, has the balance of royal power just shifted forever? Camilla may still hold the title, but power has shifted and the world knows it. With Charles retreating, Sophie rising, and the monarchy publicly divided, a new chapter is being written, one that no one saw coming. What began as a behind-the-scenes dispute over influence has quietly reshaped the architecture of royal power. Duchess Sophie, once the silent presence on the edges of ceremonial frames, has emerged not through loud declarations or power plays, but through steadiness, resolve, and timing. What some now call the Sophie Doctrine is less about domination and more about preservation, a calm, calculated response to chaos. Royal insiders say the term began as a whisper among aides, then caught fire among senior advisors who saw in Sophie something the monarchy desperately lacked: quiet force. While Camilla's visibility has lessened, her presence increasingly absent from key events, the speculation around her long-term role has intensified. Appearances that once placed her firmly beside the king have now become sporadic, carefully managed, and notably devoid of influence. Meanwhile, Sophie has become the constant not in front of the cameras, but behind every major development tied to Charles's well-being. Analysts describe her new position as a quiet regent in all but name, a phrase that would have once sounded absurd, yet now carries chilling resonance. This is not mere favoritism. This is not a moment. It is a shift. A monarchy realigning not through rebellion, but through necessity. And as Charles's health becomes treated more like a national security matter than a family concern, it's clear that decisions around him are no longer shaped by tradition alone, they're shaped by trust. A trust that no longer rests solely with Camilla. It's not a dethroning. It's not a coup. But it is unmistakably a redrawing of power. One palace insider, when asked to explain what had happened, said it simply, "This wasn't a rebellion. It was a rescue. A rescue that came not with shouts, but with whispers. Not with grandstanding, but with a handwritten note and a firm, steady hand. And now, as the public watches a monarchy they barely recognize, one shaped not by drama, but by quiet decisions made in shadowed halls, the shift becomes impossible to ignore. Sophie's rise has come not at the cost of the institution, but perhaps as its only path forward, a stabilizing force in a family defined by volatility. A reflection, some say, of the legacy Queen Elizabeth tried to preserve. And as the monarchy walks this new and fragile path, one thing is clear: some crowns are worn, but others are earned in silence. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.